most people think of human trafficking, they think of something happening half a world away. And in reality, it's right here in our own backyards, big cities, small towns across America.
Yeah, this is dark, this is ugly, this is inhuman, but we're human and we can stop it.
Thank you for the donation. Thank you.
It's rocking a 400 point right now. It's called the Hellpour face mask.
It's my life, Chad.
It's 400. We're at 400. That's so cute.
I love y'all so much.
Hi guys, welcome back to See It Ended on our lovely Tuesday night. I have an echo. Give me 1 second. There we go. Fixed it. We are so glad to be here with Patrick and Brad tonight. Patrick, what's new? What's going on with See It Ended before we introduce our lovely guests?
Well, we're getting really close to launching the platform and then having the beta launch of the entire 6-day festival, November 17th to the 22nd. So this next couple of weeks, we're lining up all of the panel discussions that'll be part of the program. We have keynotes. We have about 23 films. And then one of the things that's really exciting is we're doing organization highlights. So we really want this to be people connecting to their hearts being open and then connecting to action steps that they can take immediately. So we're highlighting certain organizations that you'll be able to immediately support or engage with, kind of learn from and volunteer for, in whatever capacity you can get engaged with this issue of ending human trafficking. That's what we want to drive. And so one of those organizations that we'll be highlighting is I Empathize. And tonight, it's our great honor to be able to have the founder of I Empathize, Brad Riley, who's been an activist since his 20s. He's worked in this sphere of wanting to make this world a better place and to take on the issues of great importance to humanity. And I Empathize was really started with the intention of working with a community, moving a community to have empathy towards those that are most vulnerable, those that are at risk of falling prey to some of the worst things that human beings do to each other, if I understand that correctly. And I've always been, ever since I first heard of empathy, it's been one of my organizations that I've been most inspired by and wanted people to learn about and wanted people to connect to. Everything done is such high quality and really geared towards stimulating our empathy, which we desperately need today. Today, during COVID, we have tomorrow's victims of human trafficking are being groomed today, and we have to put a stop to this. And it's only going to happen as we become aware and then really gain the tools to be able to fight against what's happening in our homes, in our communities right now today. So, with no further ado, I really want to introduce everyone to Brad Riley, just an amazing human being with a great story. Welcome, Brad.
Good to be here, you guys. Thanks for having us. Thanks for all you do to add your voice to the mix, and we're grateful for you.
So let's kick off with just kind of learning a little about you. I mean, so far, everyone we've had on, they all have a story of how human trafficking became something that they just couldn't turn their back on. And this is something that I feel everybody has something that they can bring to this fight. Everybody's got something. And you brought music, you brought, your talents and skill set into this arena. So can you give us a little bit of a background, how that happened for you?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, we rewind a while back. You know, I'm just a little over 50 years old now. So back in my 20s was the 90s, and I was a young musician, and I was traveling and touring. I had a friend of mine who was a drummer who had come out, and also a hip hop artist and spoken word poet and an activist and a leader. He had been kind of gone through some tough times himself in New York, grew up in Jamaica, Queens, and and it was music that really kept him focused, and then really got him latched on to education. And it was kind of his pathway to stay focused and come out of some of the gang recruitment that was going on in his life, and some of the recruitment to just, you know, criminal life or whatever it is to just make it. And so he, as he got older, he was like, you know, I want to provide a way for young people to, you know, not only be able to express themselves and let their voice be heard, but also to have a similar path that they could latch onto. So we had a group of teenagers who were on probation, in and out of jail, and they had really just kind of turned some corners and were really trying to make a difference in their life and head down a different path. So at that time, I was in my 20s, and he was like, "Why don't you come? You know, I was a young producer as well as a musician," and he was like, "Why don't you work with these guys, and you know, let's just mix it up and do a little performance." And then that led to me getting really involved. And then eventually, a couple of the young people who were in that program started touring with us and traveling with us. We went into I would produce a lot of the shows, and I would bring these young people into inner city high schools, and they would share their story of kind of overcoming some of the challenges that they had and that they struggled with in their neighborhood, showing that you can overcome those, that you can make a difference. And these were rough guys, and I was supposed to be mentoring them and changing them, and, you know, all of those kinds of things. And the truth was, they were upstreaming me. They were really changing my life. They were showing me a lot of their backstory. The more that we built a relationship, the more they trusted me, the more we began to get an understanding of each other. And once we started to understand that, you know, it began to shape how I viewed that they had arrived at that lifestyle. And, you know, when we talk about our philosophy as an organization, we talk a lot about push factors, things that push young people into vulnerability. And the same push factors that push a person into a space where they could become victimized, sometimes those same push factors are pushing 8, 10, 12-year olds into criminal activity. And if they've got an alpha personality or a type A personality, they might be being groomed in the same way a victim is being groomed, but they might be being groomed to be the victimizer. And so I started seeing the pressure that was being put on them at a young age, and how that affected them. And what I tell people is, during that year or two of those experiences in my early 20s, I went from being a musician and an artist who cared about activism to it all flipped the script. I became a full-time activist who happened to be a musician, who happened to be an artist. And a lot of that kind of fleshed out in the idea that we wanted to see change. So that meant that we had to be really strategic about the way that we see things and partner with people in communities. But arts was a real vehicle for us to be able to see that change happen. And so over the years, things have just evolved and kind of grown out of that space into who I am today. And several nonprofits over the years have manifested in the journey. But I empathize. We started about a little over 10 years ago. And that's been the current context of my life for the last decade.
Great. Can you go into a little bit, like, when you talk about push and pull factors, like, especially when it comes to someone becoming an exploiter? I mean, I think in this show we've talked a lot about things like incest and some of the things that are actually feeding the vulnerability of someone to become exploited. But you mentioned someone who becomes an exploiter. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, we in our organization, we have a couple key approaches and some key philosophies that are behind all of our work. No matter what kind of program we're working on, we have a macro narrative that we function off of. And a lot of that involves the idea of sympathy, empathy, apathy. But it also involves the idea of push and pull factors. And so if you go to our website, at iempathize.org, you can see a methodology tab on the site, and you can see an infographic with a lot of this explained. So I'll give you the verbal version of that. In essence, what we have is the issue of exploitation, and the issue of exploitation is a scale of exploitation, and we start teaching it to young people very, very young in the idea of bullying. When you think about a bully is someone who has social power over someone else, and they're exercising that social power over that other young person, and they're doing it for their own gain. And so if you start to think about the concepts around that, that's really in the most grotesque, heinous form. It's a similar definition of human trafficking, just right at the beginning of the scale of exploitation and down the slippery slope to the worst forms. If we talk about human trafficking, it's someone who has a lot of power taking advantage of someone who's weaker, and they're getting something back at the expense of that other person or the other people. And so if we can help young people begin to understand those things, then we can help them navigate them before it happens to them. And so what we mean by that is that young people, or any of us who are in a vulnerable position, most often didn't get there because of choices that we made. They were usually choices that were made for us. That's not always true, but oftentimes it's how it starts. And then maybe we start thinking we're making choices, reacting out of the push factor that happens. So this is how this happens on a grand scale. Think about what we're going through with COVID right now. That's a push factor. That's happening to all of us. We're not doing anything to make COVID happen. COVID is happening to us. We're reacting to COVID. Think about someone who goes through, a people group who goes through war. War happens to that community. They may not have chosen that war, but that war came to their community and it dismantled all of the protective mechanisms that are there. Think about it in the idea of famine or any kind of disruptor that comes in, and what is typically safe in our life, whether that's where we live or our neighborhood or our nuclear family, when those things get all disrupted and suddenly you're a refugee, you lose those protectors. And exploiters in our world have perfected those scenarios. Sometimes they create those scenarios. Sometimes those scenarios are happening outside of us, like we just talked about, and they are looking to take advantage of that, where they can operate unfettered in their criminal activity. Think about those big push factors like we just talked about. Think about them in a social way in our communities, like racism or different forms of prejudice that might be there. Think about it also in a young person's family. Maybe it's not that they're experiencing a disaster like a storm coming to New Orleans, and now suddenly there's all this disarray in New Orleans. It's going to take a long time for the police to kind of get back into their rhythm and for the protectors to get back into their rhythm. And you got all these young people who are kind of stuck in this vulnerable place. So now you have traffickers who come in and go, okay, whatever the scenario is, I'm going to take advantage of it. But that also happens in a young person's life just in their home. Maybe it's an emotional storm. Maybe it's an emotional disaster. Maybe it's abuse, like you were talking about, in the home. And it's something in that home that's pushing that young person to go look for what they should be getting in that home. They're going to go look for it somewhere else. And when a young person gets pushed into that vulnerability space, it doesn't always mean they'll be victimized. It just means that they're more likely to become victimized. And human traffickers know not only those big macro moments, how to prey upon people in a scenario to get their criminal activity to happen, they also know how to do that individually with a young person right in a neighborhood, right on the street. So, and then there's all of that same stuff happening online, and how that happens, and the access that young people have to their online activities so do traffickers, and they're there preying upon those in the same way. And if there's a young person who's feeling lonely or hurt or neglected and they're looking for that online, it's easy for a trafficker to disguise themselves as someone that is appealing to that young person. So that's what
Yeah,
push factors are.
God, it's so interesting when you think. I mean, my background was really working with the United Nations and seeing what was happening to refugees, and then seeing the predators coming in and preying on refugee populations. But when you think now, it's like a whole new thing is the vulnerability that's been created by wanting likes. It's like that where you have a void in your life, and it's being filled by very superficial things, but that have become monumentally important to a 13-year-old or a 14-year-old.
Yeah.
And so then that becomes a factor
and a
that
trafficker wants to exploit all of that.
Exactly.
That whole desire. And whether you're a young guy or a young gal or whatever the activity is, they need different players. Puppet masters who are organizing criminal activity, they need different people and different players to get their system to work. So it's not just about a victim. They also need a venue. They need buyers. They need consumers, and they also need people who are kind of helping pull the strings and make it all happen in the background. So you see a lot of push factors in like gang recruitment where 10, 12-year-olds aren't just being groomed to be exploited by someone, they're being groomed to be the exploiter.
I just want to do a quick thank you for Trashman for rating 7 individuals over to our chat really quick. Thank you so much for being a part of the stream. See, and it's a nonprofit that works for work for awareness and prevention of human trafficking. Tonight we have Brad here talking a little bit about his organization and what he does. While we're here, Brad, will you tell us a little bit more, like in detail, what I Empathize does? What's your mission? What's your ultimate objective?
Absolutely. Yeah, so our mission statement's pretty simple. We equip adults to empower youth to stay safe from exploitation. We are a 501c3. Our category that we're focused on is crimes against children. We're broader than human trafficking. We are always working upstream to try to stop exploitation before it starts, and that will always be our priority. We build programs specifically for kids, and we partner with youth to build those programs. So as media artists and activists, one of the ways we do that is I'll curate a crowd of people who need to be at the table to be able to build those programs. So first of all, it needs to be the people that it's happening to. And so we partner with folks who've gone through very difficult times in their life. A lot of times, if we're talking to other kids, it's kids who've been through the foster care system, and they have all kinds of different stories of how they've survived exploitation, a myriad of different issues that they have to face and how they've overcome those. We also work, for example, with the USC School of Social Work, where we make sure that the content that we're producing in the form of media, once it gets into the schools and into classrooms and into those youth serving spaces, that it's safe, that it's not just safe for the youth to be able to engage that content, but it's also safe for the adult who's facilitating and who's working in that space with those youth. And so we surround ourselves with educational psychologists, teachers, educators. All of us get together, and then we create programming around different subject matter. And so our flagship program is called the Empower Youth Program. You can see that on our website. There's a lot of PDFs and research and videos and explainer videos and testimonials that really help you understand what that is. But we have our youth program out in youth serving spaces. We just are allowed to announce actually this week that with LA Unified School District in Laco and a Health and Human Services grant from DC, we're able to create a distribution stream into Compton schools, into Long Beach schools, into different schools throughout LA County. That's just one example. We're always looking for a local partner to distribute our material. And so now we're in well over 30 states. I think we just also signed on with all of the foster care homes in Florida. So those are just examples of youth serving spaces that would want to use our program. And the idea is that we have youth serving professionals out there that it's really their job, their passion every single day, Monday through Friday, and at night and on weekends, if you know, the kinds of teachers we work with, they're always out there just taking care of our kiddos. And we want to partner with them to help do that better And if we can help a young person stay in school and stay safe from all the stuff that draws them out of school, then we really know that that young person has a great shot at getting out of the scenarios that they're in. So we just try to surround it. Think about it. If a human trafficker or a human trafficking network knows where our vulnerabilities are, knows how to take advantage of young people, knows where all that's happening, well, you know, the good guys always outnumber the bad. So if they're smart enough to know that, then we're smart enough to know that, to be awake to that, to know that it's happening, to acknowledge it, and to do something about it, and to do something safely about it. So that's the Empower Youth program, and that is completely focused on young people being empowered. So we teach empathy, we teach what exploitation means, we teach what pushes are in their life, we teach what negative pulls are, what people are out there to pull them into very bad scenarios, and the disguises they use to trick our young people to believing that they're there to help them. And then we teach them how to find authentic help. We teach them how to proactively have a safety plan for their life. We teach them the red flags on what to look for in exploitation so that they see it when it's happening and they know what to do in the middle of it happening. But young people, we can't just relegate, you know, safety to our young people. We've got to surround them and support them. And so that's why we helped the educators who work with those young people, and the social workers who work with those young people, and the foster programs who work with that, and juvenile justice. That's why we give them the tools to be able to capture that very difficult conversation in a safe and effective way. And because we partner with teenagers, it's always relevant. And because we're always using the arts and spoken word and poetry and hip hop and different ways of communicating very difficult subject matter in young people's lives, it always seems to really connect with the young people who are going through the program, and we see great results. On the flip side of that, we work with adults who maybe aren't working with teenagers on a regular basis, but in a very different way, they're intersecting with young people's lives. One great example of that is our partnership with the organization Truckers Against Trafficking. When I first started working with Truckers Against Trafficking and building the tools for them and co-creating materials, there were people who would say, "That is so smart. Way to go after the trucking industry. Those are the bad guys. Good job, you guys." And we're like, no, that's not why we're going after the trucking industry. Every industry has bad folks in it. The trucking industry is full of amazing people, but what's strategic about the trucking industry is that they're the eyes and the ears of our nation's highways. There are 3 million approximately truck drivers on the road today. And their job is to pay attention to everything around their vehicle to make sure that they're safe, that their cargo's safe, and that the vehicles and the people around them are safe. And while doing the normal rhythm of their daily job, if we can help them understand what an Amber Alert is, if we can help them understand what it looks like to recognize human trafficking, if we can give them a safe way to call a hotline and not have to get deeply involved, then those are the things that are easy for people to say yes to. And believe it or not, just by making some training films, by making, we have a mobile exhibit that tours around the trucking industry, by partnering with Truckers Against Trafficking and the distribution that we get through that nonprofit and the companies that are there. Now UPS drivers are trained by an I Empathize TAT film. Swift drivers, Walmart drivers, there's all kinds of fleets that are out there. The travel plazas are now trained. And we've seen over close to 1 million drivers go through the learning platform. And we've seen hundreds of tips and recoveries that have come out of that. It's a United Nations top 100 best practices fighting human trafficking. The organization Truckers Against Trafficking just got an award, presidential award. So there's just a lot of traction that's been happening with that. And right now we are replicating that strategy that's happened in transportation. That's moved from trucking to now buses. A lot of the bus systems that we have in our cities are being trained on I Empathize and Truckers Against Trafficking films. We have it now, it's state policy for many school bus drivers to have to watch the films and the training to be able to be a school bus driver. In a few states now, you have to watch the films to get your CDL to even be a commercial driver of any kind in several states now. So we're leveraging media into a space that's really unique and different And that media has a lot of curating that happens for it, and it moves the needle on people in their action, and they actually respond. So now we're working on first responders, law enforcement, hospitality, casinos, hotels. You can imagine there are many, many strategic sectors. The city of LA, we're working on a labor trafficking course that will be training just code enforcers who are in the buildings. And just like a truck driver, they see things when they're doing code enforcement that normally most of us won't see. So we're replicating that strategy in as many spaces as we possibly can.
Yeah, it's so important. The idea that within your industry, whatever your industry is, there's a way that you can connect.
Yeah.
Like the airline industry that now has the Airline Ambassadors International, where
Yeah.
they train, flight attendants and people working within the travel kind of field to be able to recognize human trafficking and signs.
Exactly.
It's just awesome what's being done, and the tools that you provide are so perfect at really getting the message across in a powerful way, in a concise way, and in a way that really draws out your desire to kind of want to do something.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah. We
God, some
make
of the testimonies,
documentary.
of the truck drivers, that have just like, they notice something that doesn't seem right, and because this is something that's on their radar now, that there are underage girls that are being put out there. I mean, that term, when I first heard that, lot lizards, when you have
Yeah.
human beings, you have somebody's daughter is being referred to as a lizard, doing the work of servicing truck drivers, just awful. But having that on the radar of the truck drivers who really do have that the pulse of the country, they can just make a phone call and bring down an international trafficking ring or rescue
Yeah.
children who are being trafficked. It's just so totally awesome.
And they're doing it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're doing it.
Yeah. I think so often we just see kind of the problem when we don't see the opportunity that holds. And I think that's the thing.
Yeah.
You see truck drivers, they're the ones who are buying all these girls at truck stops, and you see that as this negative. But instead, what you've done is, and working with Truckers Against Trafficking, is you see this as an opportunity. There are
Yeah.
so many good truck drivers, and we really need them to know what's going on and know how to respond, what they can
Yeah,
do.
everyday heroes, protectors, and defenders, and they love it. It's created company pride. You've got these drivers who just feel like, man, I've got this great mission while I'm out here on the road, and they love working for the company who's training them. There really is this kind of sense of, we're making a difference as an industry, and we're using that and leveraging that into other industries. I mean, we're I can't tell you which casino right now, but one of the biggest casinos in the world is about to do the same thing, where they're at one time there was a group of people who were saying, well, the trucking industry, they were saying, man, if we acknowledge that this exists, then that's not good for PR to say, maybe
Right.
bad things are happening on our truck lots. And the same thing a casino would say, this isn't good to acknowledge that maybe this kind of stuff is happening in our casino or our hotel. And then you've got the other group of leaders who are going, we don't want any criminal activity happening in our hotels or casinos or properties, no matter what it looks like. And so when they're able to see that they're already fighting against different forms of exploitation, even in the workplace, and equal rights for workers, and just all of that, they're already kind of doing that. This is just adding more to the mix to give them a way to give back. And we've just seen over the last few years a very positive response, and not a lot of pushback. Part of that's because we make media in a way that is safe to show to your employees, it's a very difficult subject matter, but we tell it a hard story with dignity. We also shoot every film in this space that it's happening in, so it feels like it's your own documentary. If you're working in a sector, you get a documentary that's just yours. And so we do a lot of methodology behind the media to make it really work and to make it exciting for people to use it.
I do have a question in chat, actually. And it's, how can I connect a school district with I Empathize?
You can go right to our website, and you can go to the youth section, or really anywhere you'll find a way to get more information. And Guido Hygienius is our education coordinator, and he will help any school or any youth serving space on board with the program. We have in-person programming when COVID's not an issue. And everything that we have is online now as well. And if you are a youth program, you actually can get a code and get your entire library set up. And we have a way for you to be able to engage your entire youth program, whatever it is. And we can help you do that just by reaching out to us on the website at iempathize.org.
Yeah, I was going to say that because one of the things that they found in Long Beach and other school districts, you had principals that were saying, no, we don't have that problem here. We do not want to bring this stuff up. We don't want to put any ideas in the kids' heads.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of like an obstacle to getting the information to the kids. I mean,
Yeah.
they know this stuff's going on.
Yeah, man.
But the principal's
so
like,
hard.
no, ain't happening here.
It's so hard, and it's slow as molasses.
Yeah.
It's easier to get a company now on board, but to get a school, like especially a full-on school on board, you got to get the, like you said, everyone has to acknowledge it's a problem. So that means people have to be educated before you ever get a curriculum to show up in a school. So that means we have to convince the principal, we have to convince the faculty, the administration of a school. Then somehow they have to make it okay where the parents are fine with the material as well.
Yeah.
And then somehow the curriculum writers have to be okay with it. It has to be solid, solid structure of education, systems in place and methodologies in place. Then you have to get the gatekeepers at the highest level, superintendent's offices, to say yes. And so really, when we see a full school district come on board, I mean, it's like Moses has parted the ocean back, and it's an amazing thing because it's really, we've learned over the last decade that it's few and far between to get it to go to that level. Usually what we have is like a counseling program or the health classes, there'll be a certain part of the school that will take on the programming. But what we've just done in LA is unprecedented, and we're really excited. There were only 6 cities that were given this grant, and 3 of the cities are in California, which shows you how big a problem California is. Yeah. In San Diego, Los Angeles, and Oakland, all 3 got this new grant to do prevention within the schools.
God, that's so awesome. I don't know if you heard of the principal of Valley High School in Santa Ana, where he just determined, he learned about this problem, and he knew because there was a lot of gang activity around his school and students that were being trafficked and were being approached by traffickers, and he took it on, and he just said, this is going to be a no trafficking school. Yeah, and he was personally involved in 5 rescues of girls, students from his school. Just an amazing man. When we had the FatherCon, the last FatherCon, we gave him an award as just an exemplary father who is not just a father to his own kids, but a father figure for his students. Yeah. Just when you can get that, when you can get in and get somebody ignited.
Yeah. Applauding that, man.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how we do it. So, here's a lot of times what we tell people, right, is we'll never arrest our way out of this problem. We'll never legislate our way out of this problem. We have to arrest, we have to legislate. But those are reactions to an issue that we have. We've now deemed that there's a cultural problem that needs a criminal code wrapped around it. And if it's a cultural problem, then we need our culture to be a part of the answer. If it's a community problem, we need our community to be a part of the answer. And when you see people taking the lead like this principle, I mean, that's really what's going to do it.
Yeah, that's so key. Just that point that this is not something that's just like a legal problem where we have to kind of arrest a lot of people and then the problem's going to go away. It's so much, and that was my whole thing with getting into prevention, as my focus was really on the prevention side of things and looking upstream. Why are we producing boys who are paying for sex with 12-year-old autistic children? Why do we have people coming out of our homes? What's happening that's creating this kind of a sense of entitlement and also a sense of vulnerability that's just being preyed upon?
It's so multi-layered.
It is
multi-layered.
But that's what we have to address. I mean, if we really want to deal with this, we have to start really honestly, sincerely looking at it from a self-retrospective way. I mean, as fathers, we have to start to really look at what we're doing. Where have we dropped the ball? What have we done that's allowed this kind of vulnerability or allowed this to happen? But I mean, it's a really positive thing as well. And I think, the more we can kind of see that as as something. This is something that I can actually make a difference in,
Yeah.
and
Well,
whatever I'm doing, whatever capacity.
I raised 2 boys and 2 girls. They're all in their 20s now, and we when we were raising them, we got a good example of what young girls and what young boys go through. That idea
Yeah.
that we're all experiencing push factors, and it manifests differently in the way that it shows up in the context of how we're groomed for victimization. But the truth is, like, you think about some of what's going on with our boys specifically, where literally tens of thousands of images that objectify women are scanned across our kids' eyes without even talking about pornography. I mean, just in media in general, and games, and whatever platforms are out there, that's just become very, very normalized. And what you said, Patrick, I think is really true, where we kind of create this entitlement that says, I deserve this. This is part of what I just get because I'm a guy in America, or, different versions of that in different countries. Machismo culture in Latin cultures, where you're able to just kind of, in your mind, justify thinking and saying and consuming media that objectifies women on a regular basis. And it's so normalized that by the time, to answer your question, by the time our 10-year-old gets to be a 25-year-old, man, it's a real brutal process for young men to navigate all of that that's out there. And so we got to do a better job of that. And we got to be honest about it. And we got to speak into our young people's lives. And we got to empower young ladies to not be the victim of that on smaller scale, so that it doesn't translate into a bigger form of that in their lives. Because what we see is, sometimes young people go through these, like I was saying, the bully type stuff, where you start being okay being manipulated by someone, and the next thing you know, you're not giving consent to your 16-year-old boyfriend. You're being pressured to do this, and you're compromising. You don't really want to do it, but you're giving in because of. And then all of a sudden, everything's becoming more and more okay for the victim of that to say, okay, well, it happened there, it can happen again, and then for the victimizer to keep going, oh, it happened, I can keep doing it.
Right. Kind of just when you look at like the opportunities that this generation has, and then also the parallel to that is this rise in suicide, and it's just so heartbreaking that you have people feeling that they want to give up on life at the age of 10. I mean, I don't think we've ever had the number of children committing suicide at the ages of between 9 and 12 that we have today. And I mean, just for someone to have given up on life already, I mean, just something is seriously wrong, and really needs to.
And that should enrage us, and we should do something about it. I think that's where our macro philosophy of empathy comes in, which is not letting ourselves off the hook and saying, oh, I feel bad about suffering, I feel bad about bad things happening, but we don't ever do something to change it. And
right.
we've got to make that our mantra, and we got to make that our North Star, that we always, an unempathetic law enforcement agency is bad news. An empathetic law enforcement agency is good news.
Exactly.
An apathetic school system is bad news. An empathetic school system is good news, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and just waiting till it happens to you. I think that's the, so many people are just like, well, this is not affecting me. This is not in my backyard. But I mean, if you're going to wait until human trafficking, or the kind of experience that people have with predators, if you're going to wait for that to come into your family, that's just way too late. And
too late. And with
I
the
mean,
internet and our devices, they're knocking on our kids' doors all the time.
Yeah.
You were talking about apathy, sympathy, empathy. Can you tell us a little bit about the apathy effect?
Absolutely, yeah. So this is interesting. The way that our organization works is kind of like a sales funnel. People, first of all, people don't want to buy our product. Like school districts aren't going, yeah, we would love to, bring in this anti-exploitation material. It's not difficult at all to deal with that kind of stuff. Most people, it's really hard to say yes to this stuff. So we have to help people get there. And so our ultimate yes that we want people to say yes to is we want them to equip those adults to empower those youth. So to get that to happen, we do a lot of outreach. So our outreach looks, ever since we started I Empathize, like a mixed media narrative and storytelling. We basically take all the projects that we've ever worked on and we ask people, whether sometimes they're survivors, sometimes they're victims who did not survive and lost their life to an issue. Sometimes they're heroes and activists who are out there risking their life to fight for others. And we curate all those stories in our training films. So we have literally over 100 training films. Some of them, most of them are small, 5-minute, 10-minute module type stuff. Some of them are full feature documentaries that have been to film festivals and toured with the United Nations. But the thing that we've always done is build exhibits that teach people all these principles we've been talking about. The exhibits teach people about empathy. They teach people about exploitation. They teach people about the pushes and the pulls, but they do it through the stories of the people's lives that are living it and experiencing it. So for example, the apathy effect exhibit is a mixed media immersive exhibit that is storytelling through film, short film, through photography, and some award-winning photographs in there as well. And then and also through artifacts, which I think is probably the most powerful part of our exhibits. And the artifacts are something physical from the life of a survivor or a leader that's out there working on these issues. And we bring something physical from their world and we put it in the exhibit so that when you're in that space with them, you're not only meeting them through photography, you're not only meeting them through film, but you're feeling something that they've touched. Sometimes it's their shoes and we tell their story through their shoes. That allows us to tell the story of a victim without having to put their face up and make them a poster child and re-exploit them through media. Sometimes one of my favorite artifacts is a spark plug. And we had a friend of ours who we funded a program in Cambodia when we were first starting out. And we have a little film called The Scooter Hero. And basically everybody was trying to fix these problems of child exploitation in these different villages, and outsiders were coming in, NGOs were coming in, and none of them could fix it. And then this one Khmer guy who works for an amazing organization called Chab Dai, he said, look, you're just doing it all wrong. You need a relationship with these folks. And he went in on a scooter and he would just go with a flip chart and he would teach, but he needed to spend time with those villages to build that relationship. So that's what he did. So the spark plug from his scooter, we took that out and made it an art piece in the exhibit. And of course, got him some new spark plugs. And then, but the message is powerful when you think about it. Like the littlest thing, like a spark plug, can make the biggest difference. And that's the metaphor for activism. The little gestures we make, sometimes the most reasonable things that we're willing to do, will make a radical difference in people's lives. And so the exhibit is inspirational. It's heartbreaking, but most of all, it's empowering. And you see the resilience of folks who work on very dark issues and overcome them regardless of what they've gone through. And so the exhibit tours, and it used to be called the empathy effect. And the reason why is we would say, look, it's our job to cultivate empathy within a community. And so we wanted that exhibit to do that, to cultivate empathy. And we also used to teach that, that if we drive empathy into a community, it'll squash out apathy. And we've learned a little bit over the years. And this is where we flipped the script and switched the name and started calling it the apathy effect. What we've realized over the years is that actually apathy is needed to trigger empathy. Think about that for a second. Apathy is actually the active ingredient that makes empathy go kapow and blow up in a community. So here's what I mean by that. Most people live in the state of sympathy. That's where 90% of us are, where it's like, we're good people. We don't like people going through suffering, but a lot of times we don't know what to do. We don't know how to engage it. We don't know how to make a difference in big issues. So we just kind of get stuck in sympathy, which is, I really care about this, but I don't know how to do anything. I'm still disengaged from it. Most people are there until you piss them off enough to drive them to empathy. And what happens is when apathy, so for example, when criminal activity gets so pervasive, a lot of times heinous kind of crimes, it's covert, it's hidden, it's under the surface. But when it starts to get pervasive and flagrant, and it starts to manifest itself in a way that it encroaches into the person who's sympathetic, it does something to them. It causes them to be angry about this issue, and it pushes them past the indifference of the issue and past the passiveness of the issue, and it forces them to go, I don't like this, I want to do something about it. And the more apathy starts to spread into the community, the more people start to rise up and do something. Great example of this would be what happened with Martin Luther King and the Petraeus Bridge, when everyone was crossing over the bridge, and the police brutality that was happening in the civil rights march that was going on. When that was happening and the TV cameras were never there, nobody ever really did anything about it. It was like the same song, second verse, but no one was listening. But the song was being sung. Don't you see the suffering of the civil rights injustices that are happening? Don't you see it? Don't you see it? And no one was seeing it. And then all of a sudden, there was enough press and enough news, and suddenly people had TVs in their living rooms for the first time. And when those cameras came in and honed in on what was really happening, and the world was able to see the injustice that was taking place, it wasn't long after that that policies began to change, and that like there was some immediate change that began to happen because of that. Because suddenly, what was people were sympathetic to something, it encroached into their world enough to where it angered them to say, we're not okay with it. That's just one example of how that kind of happens. And when we're able to take the exhibit and show it to a community and go, hey, these criminals are operating unfettered in your community, how do you feel about that? It's pretty amazing when people realize that. They start to go, no, thank you, no mas. And the next thing you know, there's a change. And sometimes it's simply the principal was at the exhibit and went, we're taking that in. You know, we never know what it's going to be.
Right. Yeah, it's
We
so
also
true.
have a 48-foot tractor trailer exhibit that travels around called the Empower Freedom Project, and that's just for truckers. And so it's the exact same kind of exhibit with a different storyline specific to trucking. And Truckers Against Trafficking manages that. We co-create that with them, and then it tours around as well. And that's been to all kinds of state capitals and the U.S. Capitol, and our exhibits have toured. When legislation's happening in different states or in different countries, we'll install an exhibit and help teach the legislators right before they go vote. We did an exhibit just for Mexico and the Human Rights Commission of Mexico several years ago, and there was no legislation in Mexico on the books to fight human trafficking. And we partnered with several folks down there and built an exhibit with film photography artifacts. Every senator that went through to do the votes would have to go through the exhibits and learn about the issue before they went to vote. And it went from 0 support to 100% support. And the exhibit was a big part of that. Obviously, a lot of other people working and lobbying and messaging, but the exhibit was a key component to that.
Wow. Why don't we look at one of the films, like some of your content? Do we have
great.
something we can kind of put up?
Yeah.
I think that would be a
one
good.
of the things that we're working on right now, and we'll just I'll give you a teaser video, just an explainer video. You can see some of the footage of the learning platforms that we build. We spend a lot of money on cinematic filmmaking that's very educational based. That doesn't make it in. We don't submit it to film festivals, and they go on learning platforms, and that's really why it's so effective. Is because of the way that we tell the story. And so this new program that we're working on is called the Intersect Response Platform. And this is taking 10 years of archive media where I have personally interviewed law enforcement from FBI all the way down to cops in different states. I've interviewed uh, different policymakers and prosecutors, obviously many survivor leaders, and local activists who are working on these issues. They're all in these films, including representatives from Polaris Project and the Hotline. We really break down what people need to do to be able to make a difference, and we turn it into these small courses that people can take to recognize and respond. So this video that you're about to see is called the Intersect Response Platform Explainer video, and it'll just give you an idea of the kind of educational media that we're working on.
Coming up.
Yeah. While it's getting ready, I'll just keep sharing a little bit about it as it queues up. Oh, here we go.
There we go.
My name is Elena, and I'm a mom. I want to tell you about youth exploitation. Every day, vulnerable youth are being exploited and trafficked, and every day you intersect with these youth. At your workplace, in your social space, and even in your home and neighborhood. Human trafficking, an extreme form of exploitation, is the second largest criminal industry in the world, with more than 40 million victims. It can be hard to know how to scratch the surface of this issue, but you can make a difference, a powerful difference, right where you are. Introducing the Intersect Response Platform, equipping adults to recognize and respond to exploitation and human trafficking. By signing up on Intersect, you will be shown how to fight youth exploitation within your unique context. For example, police officers will be given tools specifically designed for law enforcement. Teachers will be given educational tools designed for middle and high school students. Social workers will be given tools and strategies that they can share with their clients. Parents, first responders, medical workers, hotel workers, faith leaders, all spaces that intersect with youth exploitation. The curriculum includes top-notch short documentaries, training videos, expert interviews, survivor stories, illustrated scenarios, interactive questions, activities, application response plans. Intersect emphasizes a victim-centered, empathetic approach that identifies possible indicators of exploitation, external factors that can make youth more vulnerable, solutions for how to prevent, report, and end exploitation. Top companies and agencies routinely use I Empathize programs to train their staff on youth exploitation. Join Intersect at iempathize.org and be equipped to fight human exploitation.
Yeah, so that in addition to our youth curriculum and material, that's our identification program for adults, and so we will be launching that platform course by course between now and January, and then every quarter we'll be launching new courses.
Yeah, one thing that struck me that when you talk about the dealing with law enforcement and having an empathetic law enforcement,
Yeah.
I mean, how things changed. I mean, I was talking to one vice cop, and he was talking about how they used to refer to it as the trash run when they used to go out to
Yeah.
arrest prostitutes, and it was just the thinking has just completely flipped, and
Yeah.
now understanding what these girls are going through, and for law enforcement to have that kind of sensitivity to see from the other side
Yeah.
what their
And
perspective is,
first
how they ended up
responders,
there.
frontline workers in general.
All of them, yeah.
Yeah.
It's exactly right. Yeah, I
Yeah,
remember.
and that's an important part. You know, when you're in an interdiction, and whether you're a cop or whether you're a firefighter, ambulance, or ER, whatever that is, if you're in an interdiction of some kind, first of all, you see so much craziness that it's really hard to keep empathy cultivated in you as an individual. And if you're struggling to do that, then it's especially hard to be able to lead with empathy in the moment. It's, you know, empathy has to come from you. It has to come out of you into the scenario, into the situation. And when you're constantly, the people that you're trying to help the most despise you and don't want to work with you, I mean, that the cops are saying, well, I wish people were more empathetic towards me. And it's
Right.
like, well, okay, yes, we understand that, but you signed up for a job that sometimes doesn't give you that privilege. So that means you have to really work extra hard to find it in yourself. And so we really want to help frontline workers to be able to cultivate that within themselves and also be able to lead with it while they're in the moment.
Yeah, so many fields, like judges too. There was the one
Judges,
judge in the
sure,
Star
same.
Court, not knowing what they're seeing. I remember that was one
Yep.
of the judges here that worked in the Star Court, and
He's
she
in
was saying that had
Star
no idea
Court's
what
in
I
one
was
of our
seeing.
documentaries.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
so important.
Judge Pratt, and she's in one of our docs where we talk about that. Also, we have a judge from Ohio who also had a court that was specializing in human trafficking, and the reason why he started it was the same reason Judge Pratt did, which was they started having these cases come through over and over and over again, and they went, wait a minute, this can't be possible. And then they did something to flip the court system around, and yeah, it's very powerful.
Yeah, going from blaming the kids. I mean, that's what Judge Pratt told me was that she was like, why are you doing this to yourself? Why are you being such a bad kid? And it's like, and then realizing the real position of these kids
Yeah,
and how that completely changed.
yeah,
Yeah, the other thing that
for
she told
sure.
me too that really struck me, I never forgot, was she said, like, traffickers are there for their victims 24/7. And if we don't show the same compassion, the same commitment to them,
Yep,
it's just we're not going to win. It's just like,
yep, she's right. She
yeah,
knows what she's talking about.
yep,
She knows.
yeah, so true.
I love that you talked a little bit about school bus drivers and truck drivers. In the clip, what stood out to me was UPS and Amazon, because those are people that are always coming to your house, delivering stuff. What other profession do you think would really help with fight against
Yep.
human trafficking, that would benefit in learning this?
I think any security teams that are out there, no matter what you work with security, you're always looking to keep that property safe. So security guards, security details are in a lot of different kinds of properties. Obviously the mall culture's changing over time and COVID hasn't helped. But I think, kids will always have public places they go hang out in. And so getting security to understand that. Um, uh, you know, Obviously, anywhere where you see youth congregating, traffickers are going to go try and prey upon that. And then there's just interesting things that happen. Like for example, one of our one project we did several years ago, and we went undercover up into North Dakota for 6 months, and we put a college neuroscience major in a truck, and he grew a monster beard, and he was an undercover truck driver for a while up in the North Dakota oil fields. We actually have a small training documentary that came out of this, and then we have a massive oil and energy campaign that came out of this as well with Truckers Against Trafficking. But basically, we went up there, and the reason why North Dakota was having a problem with human trafficking was we found out about this from two sources. One was from truck drivers who were reporting it, and then two was from an analytics company who was monitoring sex for sale ads around sporting events. And then they began to notice that the pings in North Dakota were more or equal to those of major sporting events, except for a major sporting event, it's only for a week or so. But they were noticing it ongoing on the regular up in North Dakota. And what had happened was that North Dakota had an oil boom. And in that boom up there in the Balkan, there was a town called Williston, North Dakota, that was kind of the epicenter of that. Williston's a town of about 12,000 citizens, and they've always had energy and oil as part of their economy. They've actually had booms and busts over the years, but they were having a massive boom at the time, and over 40,000 workers, men predominantly, descended upon a town of 10 to 12,000 people. So the infrastructure's out of whack. There's not enough hotels to put these guys up. So you start having companies build barracks, like, and they call them man camps. And all of a sudden, the strip clubs up there started getting national news that they were packed, and that girls who were stripping were making more money in Vegas, more money in Williston on a Saturday night than they were making in Vegas. And then a lot of the pimps and traffickers started picking up on that. And the next thing you know, you were having a big trafficking problem. So you were having pimps and traffickers who were sending victims from Vegas to North Dakota to go make more money in North Dakota. You had pimps from Chicago. We were able to identify that there were Russian mafia bringing girls in to North Dakota from Canada, from Minneapolis and St. Paul, and they were coming in on Amtrak. They were coming in all these different ways and landing in North Dakota. Now, we were able to work with a bunch of activists and groups and nonprofits up there. We were also working with federal law enforcement. We were also working with the state. And so we were able to see a lot of good things happen after we released the expose video of Williston and what happened, to the point that we eventually got that film and that awareness campaign featured at the Nobel Peace Prize Forum. And so, yeah, you just never know where a situation is going to pop up. And it's really these, unique sex ratio imbalance scenarios that you see traffickers really prey upon. And that's why you see a lot of kind of brothel activity around military bases, and, and you see it just show up in different ways. I mean, you got your own version of it on Wall Street because you have male dominated space on Wall Street, and it just comes in a different package and a different context there. So, if you're looking, you're going to find it, and it's going to show up in a lot of different ways. We have found, though, that strategic sectors, any form of transportation, is someone's going to be able to see it and recognize it. And then obviously hotels, hospitalities, convention centers, you can kind of think through the list of where someone would say, these are the spaces you would normally see human trafficking happening. And we're going into wherever those industries are and saying, hey, you want to make a difference? Here's how you do it.
Wow. What have been some of the most rewarding experiences you've had in doing the work that you've done? I mean, if you were to pick one or two that were just really meaningful.
I think rewarding means that the impact is being made. And so anytime that we can really hear from people that the programs that we're co-creating programs with people who live and work in those spaces. So it to them, it's their programming. We just make it happen and resource it. And so hearing their testimonies of how they're using the material in their space and they're making a difference in young people's lives, or we're seeing recoveries, or we're seeing, law enforcement who say, wow, this really changed the way that we approach this issue. Anytime we hear that we're moving the needle, then that makes us happy. We're thrilled to be able to find partnerships and collaboration. It's hard to collaborate. People say they like collaboration, but that's bull. Most time when you get into the sandbox, nobody wants to share their toys. But it sounds nice. And so when you see people actually collaborating and actually doing it, that lights me up. That gets me on fire. I always say you got to tribalize the way you empathize. And so there's really no way to tackle big problems without a lot of people working on it together. My mom was an algebra teacher, and I would be looking at the problem, and then I would just go, psh, and then she would tell me, well, you're never going to solve that problem by not looking at it. You got to start by looking at it and acknowledge that the problem is there. And then if it's too difficult for you to solve by yourself, it doesn't mean you can't solve it. It means that maybe you need some help. Maybe someone needs to teach you a method. Maybe you need someone to tutor you a little bit. But the more you are able to pull people in to help you look at that problem, suddenly what seemed impossible was possible. When a firefighter goes up to a building and it's on fire and has one fire hose, the fire hose isn't going to put the fire out. It's not going to do it. But 20 fire hoses will. You don't need to change the methodology. Water puts out fire. What you need is more water and more people. You don't just because you tried by yourself one time and you didn't know how to do it or it didn't work, doesn't mean you didn't know what you were doing. It just meant that you needed people to help you. So we gotta collaborate more. So anytime I see people step up to the plate and do their part, I'm just thin slicing a little bit of my life. I've got a few things I'm awesome at and a lot of things I suck at. So what I want to do is just carve out a little bit of my awesomeness and hand it to the mix. And that's what we're doing right now. All of us are giving a slice of our awesomeness to try to make a difference. And so that encourages me. And when you really, really see it happen on a practical level, and the truth is, we've relegated our work to collaboration. So we can't be successful unless somebody is working with us to make that happen. So that's a big part of it. Um, Probably one of my favorite projects and one of the hardest projects I've ever done and been a part of was our movie Be Relentless. And that was really my first I direct a lot of films and produce a lot of films and co-direct and co-produce a lot of stuff with great people and good teams. um, but we made one movie that was a crossover movie that we just wanted to create in perpetuity to be able to help people understand this issue and tell the story in such a compelling way that you couldn't help but say yes to doing something. And so that project was centered around a partnership with a woman named Norma Bastidas, who is a survivor of human trafficking. She was groomed and trafficked by the Sinaloa cartels, by the El Chapo cartels. She was trafficked to Japan, eventually was able to escape, a lot of work on her own with the help of a few other folks. And she eventually got to Canada, became a single mom, 2 kids, and overcame her victimization and started a new life. Her marriage didn't last that long, and she was a single mom raising these 2 babies. And at 36 years old, she started revisiting some trauma in her life from her past and the trafficking of her past and the exploitation and victimization of her past. And so instead of becoming a raging alcoholic, she decided she'd go out on a jog one day to burn off a negative energy in a positive way. And she ended up having the gift of Forrest Gump. She ran and ran and ran and never had to come back. And the next thing you know, within 6 months, she qualified for the Boston Marathon. And then she became a world-class ultra marathon runner doing 100-mile foot races, was featured on the Oprah Network. And then finally she said, you know what, I'm a great athlete, but I've never told my story of what I've really come through. And we partnered with her to tell her story. And in telling her story, she decided she was going to break another world record. So she ended up breaking the record for the longest triathlon in the history of the world. In the 1980s, there had been a man who had broken the record, and she tripled it. And she swam 122 miles in the Caribbean Ocean. She biked from Cancun, Mexico to Texas, to Mexico City, to Texas, to Georgia. And then she ran from Georgia to Washington, D.C. in 64 days. And she broke the world record and shared her story along the way. And we were able to get that project out to a lot of press and a lot of news agencies, and the United Nations became a partner, and she was a celebrity ambassador. And it just proves, if Norma can do something that huge to fight human trafficking, we can all do something small, something. And if Norma can overcome all the heinous crimes committed against her, and speak this message out, then that's an inspiration for others to overcome what they've been through. And so to me, that message is the most simple and powerful, but the most difficult project I've ever worked on. We were there shooting 64 days straight, every day in the water, on the bikes, and while she's running. And I'm super proud of our small production team who made that happen. And we got in a lot of great film festivals, and we've been able to, and that material now tours schools and events. And then we have a new learning platform that's coming out, like we've been mentioning, where we'll also take that media and it'll be a course. So that's probably one of my favorite projects, but I love all of them.
Yeah, I remember I went to the screening of that film and met her there, and it was really interesting because we started speaking in Japanese. It's like,
yeah, right.
From her experience in Japan.
Spanish, English, and Japanese.
Yeah, she's an incredible person, and
Incredible.
Seeing that documentary is just amazing. I mean, just what you guys went through as a team
Thank you.
to make that happen. The accident that happened on the way.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many things.
Yeah, we got hit twice
Yeah.
by a semi truck, and put 6 of our crew members in the hospital. They got rear-ended following Norma going 15 miles an hour on a bike. They were the shield vehicle, and if they hadn't been in between her and this semi truck, the truck would have hit Norma. But instead, they're going 15 miles an hour, and it rear-ended them at 65 plus miles an hour and totaled the vehicle and knocked the vehicle 50 feet off the road.
Yeah. Was that in the States or was that in Mexico?
That was actually the day we had celebrated that morning that we had 1 day left in Mexico. We were crossing the border. We were 30 miles from Nuevo Laredo.
Wow. Yeah. So when people think that being a filmmaker and a documentary filmmaker is just a cushy job.
Yeah. I'm still paying for that one, bro. 5 years later, 6 years later.
God, but it's just so rewarding though, I think, to be able to see what you've done, like and how impactful those films are, and how much they really change people's perspective and make people really want to get involved.
Yeah.
And I think the collaboration, I mean, that was my whole vision for doing See It Ended to begin with, was how do we get, film, music, artists, spoken word artists, get everybody together and have kind of a true collaboration where we can then direct people and show people, what they can do. Because so many people ask that question, and then if they don't get an answer quick enough, for many people, they lose it. You just go back to watching TV, and that kind of moment is gone. So how do we really capitalize on that moment when the empathy is there, when somebody is awakened to this? So connect to I empathize. We would so much want to direct people to what the resources that you're providing, because that's what we can do is get an audience. We can then direct that audience to what you're doing and get that to work. I mean, I would love to see your materials in India and in Kenya and places where it really needs to be, where the front line really exists for a lot of people and they don't have the resources.
And hey, Patrick, just so you know, we have built, and nobody's ever even seen it. We've worked with some really amazing illustrators, and it's very simple and beautiful illustration and some beautiful music behind it. And we've created a animated series that can be translated into any language whatsoever. And so that's really the goal of it. And once we get through the next set of launching our program, for Siri translated into any language whatsoever. My Siri just came on for some reason. It's talking to me. Creepy. But I think she heard the word series.
That's it.
Anyway, so yeah, but that's the intent of that, and it's for all audiences, young and old. It will even be appropriate for children. And so, yeah, we also want to feel like that we have some tools that are transcendent. A lot of times this issue is very contextualized and very much cause and effect to a neighborhood and a space, but a lot of this issue is transcendent as well. And so where we can take our message and get it out to more and more people, that's kind of our obsession.
Yeah, it reminded me of it. I visited Chabdai too when I was in Cambodia. Yeah, and having the guy that I talked to, I don't remember his name now, but he'd been in Southeast Asia for so long. He's an American guy. Yeah,
American guy.
He was an American guy, but he'd been there like almost 20 years, I think. But he was talking about things like, we have no comprehension of what it's like to live in a place where there's no safety net at all, and where you die in the parking lot of a hospital, they won't let you in.
You have no rights.
You have no rights.
Certain people in Cambodia and all countries, who are marginalized, but in certain countries where you have no rights whatsoever. Yeah.
But it was really eye-opening that, and they collect so much data. They've been so effective at really getting data. And so you can really see the issue, not just emotionally, but really really from so many experiences that they've been able to kind of accumulate. Incredible organization.
My first exploration trip on this issue, I'd been working with vulnerable, victimized youth for a long time, but to really go deep into the actual crime of human trafficking, really Love 146 and Chabdai were the two organizations that really helped me kind of find my own path. So I owe a lot to those guys, even if they don't know it.
Yeah. We all do. I mean, everyone who's kind of taken a step into the waters of making a change, somebody got us there. You know,
Yeah.
somebody and people opened our eyes. And that's what I mean. That's really the hope for this show too. I mean, this program is really that we can reach into new audiences, reach out to people who may not be familiar, and
Yeah.
provide a voice to them that they can't forget.
Yeah.
So don't forget Brad. Nobody can forget Brad.
Brad,
Well, we're one big choir, and I think we're just shouting together, getting this thing happening. It's exciting, and I'm grateful for you. You don't have to do this. You could do anything else. You don't have to do this, but you decide to do this, and that's just sick, and I'm super grateful.
Yeah, likewise.
how
And just
has
have yeah, go
sorry,
away, go away.
how has I emphasized like changed over the years, and like what should we expect in the future?
Yeah, we've always focused on prevention and media and strategy. We're high on strategy, um, and trying to create scalability. I think a lot of our projects in the past were not necessarily scalable. We were like going after something that was happening in the moment. And through the years, we've just developed a huge archive library of amazing content. I mean, some of the films we make are, 15 minutes, 30 minutes long, and there's 20 hours of raw footage just in interviews, not even including shooting, B-roll. And so a lot of what we're doing now is archiving tons of material and just trying our best to distribute it and get it out to as many people as possible and to do strategic partnerships. So we're excited about that. We want to infiltrate more and more industry sectors. We want to partner with more and more cities. We've been able to get the city of Orlando to acknowledge and work with us. We've gotten the city of Vegas at a pretty high level to work with us. We've got the city of Los Angeles to work with us. So many other cities as well. But we want to see more of those cities participating in the programs that we have. And because it's not Empathize isn't just us. It's this host of voices and this host of people who have added their voice and who have shared their expertise, and we've curated that. So really, what we're doing is, we've got some of the best minds and best teaching that is out there on these issues, where they poured their heart out on film to be able to teach to others and do it in a relevant way. What we want to see is more and more people seeing that content, understanding the issue, and being able to make a difference. And, ultimately changing people's lives, legit changing their lives.
That's what we need.
Yep. So you're going to see us expanding into a lot. You're going to see what we did with the trucking industry. You're going to see that happen in a lot more sectors, and it's already happening.
Do we have another film that you would want to show? Is there something else that would be effective at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I think on the docket today, we had a promotional for the youth program. You can go see that on our website, the Empower Youth Program. We also had a teaser for Be Relentless, I think. But there is a course, a lesson that we have that's kind of the intro to the issue. And if you wanted to show that and help people kind of understand the issue at a deeper level, more than just a promotional piece, then you can show that one.
Okay, so the sample lesson.
Yeah, let's do a sample
do
lesson.
that,
They're
yeah.
not very long. And so what on our courses, what we do is we create lessons that teach everybody similar concepts. What is human trafficking? Who's a trafficker? Who are their targets? What are their tactics? What is exploitation? What's broader than just human trafficking? And we unpack all of that. And those lessons can be a la carte, placed into lots of different courses for people. And then what we do is we produce an intro for your sector that looks like what you would go through based on your workspace. And then we create a red flags that's very specific to you as well. And so you're seeing a sample of one of those course lessons.
Inherently, as human beings, we want to be loved. We want to be loved by somebody. And if we don't feel that love in our homes, we're going to be looking for that.
All kids are vulnerable to trafficking.
People always ask me, where's human trafficking occurring? And it's occurring everywhere.
I'll be honest with you, it wasn't on our radar, and I've been in law enforcement 38 years, and I'm kind of ashamed to say it wasn't on my radar.
So many people don't see victims as victims because of how they perceive a prostitute.
We have kids who come from two-parent families, not divorced, no criminal history, and they too have found themselves victims of trafficking.
He said, baby, do you know what I am? And I said, no. And he said, I'm a pimp. You're mine now, you belong to me. You're gonna get in this truck and sleep with this guy, and I'm gonna get the money. You know, that's how I got in.
It's a crime that's often described as occurring in secret, but really it occurs in the open.
It can happen in sweatshops, it can happen in agriculture. We've had cases in restaurants and hotels, in the hospitality industry.
The tactics of a trafficker are going to evolve to match their prey. These individuals are smart, they are savvy, they're typically excellent communicators.
Young girl, she's 17 years old, gonna graduate early from high school, and she's on a dating website, and somebody says, hey, you're really pretty, I would like to hang out, goes and meets this guy at a motel, and the next thing you know, she's being trafficked.
They act like they really care about them. They'll act like they're their boyfriend or girlfriend, and they understand them.
They want that victim to be more afraid of the system than they are of the trafficker.
I think it's beyond important to notice those little things that are going wrong. I needed somebody to really care because I didn't have that, and most victims don't.
That makes such a difference when they're actually treated as a human being.
You can make a difference talking about this issue with your colleagues, really taking a stand for those who are exploited in our society. You can make a difference.
You'll get a movie like that, then you'll get 4 or 5 questions where we'll make sure that you're retaining some of the knowledge, and then you get more lessons. So then the next lesson will go deeper into why it happens. The next lesson will be about the disguises that a trafficker uses. The next lesson will be about empathetic and victim-centered approach. And then the next lesson will be red flags on what you should do, what you should look for, and how you should respond in your particular space. And so, you know, it's very ADD friendly. So if you don't want to watch a big long movie and then have a big question quiz at the end, you know, it really does just kind of move you through the content. And then all of a sudden you find yourself being empathetic and wanting to make a difference. And then we always print out digital or printed wallet cards that are reminders of the red flags, depending on what sector you're in. And so it's a real simple approach. You know, it's authenticate that the issue is happening, show that it's happening in your space, prove that you can do something about it and make a difference, and that you can do it safely. And if we can really show people that, then they typically respond well and actually make the call whenever they see something.
It's so cool how you can get through to someone. And then this is what I found too, in speaking to high school students and things. Almost always there's somebody, you just see them melt when you're speaking, and it's like because suddenly they're starting to see themselves or see the experience of their friend as different than what they thought it was. Like it had a different name, and then all of a sudden they're saying that sounds a lot like this situation, and it's that old, like the Harriet Tubman quote that's not necessarily her quote, but the thing, I saved 500 slaves and I could have saved 1,000 more if they only knew that they were slaves. And that idea of not recognizing yourself, you know, in the situation that you're in, like while you're in it, you're giving it a different name. You've painted some kind of fancy decorations around it, But then when somebody can hold it up, which you do through your materials, like you hold it up and then a kid just kind of like, oh, that's like what I'm going
Yeah.
through, or that's what my friend's going through, or my sister. So powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, we see that happen a lot, Patrick, where you've got we don't just teach when we're doing the youth program, which there's another video. I'm not sure how much time we have, but in the youth program, we really do focus on not just self-identification. Obviously, sometimes it's very difficult to self-identify and to self-disclose.
Yeah.
And then it's very difficult for sometimes a teacher to step in and do that. But oftentimes it's easier for a peer to be able to do that. And so we do teach a lot about not just a safety plan for you, but a safety plan for the people you care about, so that when a young person's considering what it means to be safe, they're also considering what it means for their friends to be safe.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I spoke at a lot of like high school human trafficking clubs. And
Yeah.
and they, when they start getting the word out to their peers, it's so powerful. When
Yeah.
they can kind of educate from kind of a horizontal, understanding of what somebody is going through. It's very
Yeah.
powerful.
If you guys want to watch the youth portion, if we have time, it's also short. It's a couple minutes long, but you'll get a glimpse of what's happening in the classroom, and you'll get a glimpse of some of the youth who participate in the media, and it kind of echoes some of your point, Patrick.
Which one is that? Is that the Empower Youth program?
Yep, the Empower Youth program.
Okay.
We're pulling it.
Yeah, let's
now.
watch it.
Yeah, and this is the Empower Youth program is a lot of different artists who combine together, different poets, spoken word, illustration. When we go into heavy subject matter about the actual human trafficking victims, they're real stories and real cases, but names have been changed, and they're all comic book illustrations. The two young people who share their identity and are the hosts of the program, they're both survivors of horrible victimization, but we don't let them share their own victimization. All we let them share is their advice on, if I had known at 13 how to stay safe, this is what I would have done.
Yeah.
About 5.5 years ago, I was in a place, it was a residential treatment facility, and I was there because I wasn't right with myself and I actually wanted to commit suicide, and things weren't right in the home.
I had a rough childhood. I myself had struggled with an alcoholic father, sexual abuse, physical abuse, self-mutilation, addiction, living on the streets.
In the communities that our kids come from, they deal with a lot of pressure. They're pushed in a lot of directions.
If these people didn't come into my life and weren't empathetic and actually did something about the place that I was at and, helped me be a successful person, then I wouldn't be here right now.
We have recognized that there is definitely an issue with sexual exploitation that needs to be addressed. So that really initiated us taking a look at, okay, what's out there? What was really important to me is that the curriculum be relevant. So when we started looking at I Empathize, we were really impressed, and we really thought, okay, let's try this out. Let's see what the kids think. Let's see how they respond.
The feedback I hear from the kids is, wow, that's super cool. The way that it was filmed is super cool. And because they use real teenagers that have real problems and that almost everybody can relate with in some way or another, I see the kids just light up with the media and they're like, oh, I understand that, I recognize that.
I just made it my passion to tell my story and follow my dreams of being a spoken word poet and letting the world know what I went through.
This is what empathy means to me. It's really important to put yourself in somebody else's shoes and to open yourself up to the fact that, other people hurt too, and it's not just about you.
The idea of empathy, how you care for one another,
how one another should be treated. That was real strong in the messaging. It wasn't scare tactics. And that sort of sold me on the deal with I Empathize.
I think kids want to feel better. They want to feel empowered. They want to know that they can make a difference in the world. And when we're giving them that information and that little steps on how they can do it and what to identify and what to do about it, they feel great.
They have helped you plenty of time, yes, thank you. Consistency, right?
If this curriculum went nationwide in all of the schools, I think we'd see a reduction in not just sexual exploitation, I think we'd see a reduction in exploitation of kids, period. And I think it will strengthen relationships, potentially with law enforcement, with schools, with community agencies. There could be a ripple effect.
I feel like the solution, like you guys said, is to empathize, to do something about it. Don't just feel sorry for it, actually do something.
I'm Carrie, and I empathize.
My name is Janelle, and I empathize.
My name is Marty Zaffaroni, and I empathize.
My name is Olivia DeLynn, and I empathize.
My name is Shelley, and I empathize.
Who empathize? I empathize.
Yeah,
Yes.
stuff like that.
So awesome. I love PJ. PJ is going to do a piece in the film festival too.
Oh, is it cool? Cool,
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, we flew PJ out from Denver. Well, for the, I think
For the Yes
Long
event, yeah.
Beach,
For the
Long
Yes
Beach.
event that we had, yeah. That's
Yeah,
right.
the Yes event. Yeah, I forgot he flew out for that and performed.
Yeah.
Yeah, good dude.
There's so many young people that really want to do something. And I think this is just so cool that you plant that seed that this is something you can really make a difference in. And and I think we run into this so many times. It's like just seeing and just caring. Like from the other film you had too. It's like we walk past it all the time. We walk past it, and it's like we just don't. It's just not for me to be bothered by. But if once we can tap into that empathy, where it's like you walk past and you see this is a person that just needs someone to say something to them. You know, we said that. I don't know if you talked to Ori Freeman, but that was her thing, was
Yeah.
just
Yeah,
that she was invisible. You know, she just felt invisible. Nobody saw her as a human being. You know,
Yeah,
where the only people that
Ori,
did see her were objects.
Ori participated in a couple projects with us. Ori's actually, some of her voiceover story is in Be Relentless.
That's so great. Yeah, she's powerful, and
She's
just kind of
so
what she's
powerful.
done with her life is so incredible.
Yeah.
You know, after coming from what she did. But I think that message, I mean, if we can get that through to people, you know, just if you can see someone with empathy, but you see someone, you see what they're going through, just a word at the right moment, like it doesn't have to be this massive big thing. It can be something so small as just asking if someone's okay. If it's, I mean, you just putting yourself into a position where you recognize that this person may be really having some trouble, and demonstrating some care, and that can actually open the door to someone really finding change or you know, like really changing the course of their life.
That's so true, Patrick. I am an eyewitness to that. I've done a lot of interviews, lots and lots of interviews with survivors, and I ask them that question a lot. And you know, and that comes back almost always as part of the answer in some way, shape, or form. Is I wish somebody had just seen me, noticed me. And a lot of times when we're doing our teaching, we did a big thing for LA Fire Department, and we had one of our survivor leader partners come and share, and we brought her in, and she basically said, I want to tell you how many times I've been in the back of your ambulances and I've interacted with you and you didn't see me. And man, it hit him hard.
Yeah, I'll bet. Yeah, well, this has been good. This is important stuff. I really hope everyone can kind of, you know, who watches this can feel connected to what you're doing and what you're providing, and that people can really feel that this is so urgent that we kind of get this out, you know, into the hands of people who really need it. I think that point when the teacher was saying, you know, if this was in every school, what a difference it would make, you know, and I couldn't agree more. It's like if we had this kind of content, if we had this sensitivity, you know, when you talk about being strategic, it's so inspiring to hear your sensitivity to what a survivor has gone through, and not to put them in a situation where they're going to feel re-exploited, or they're going to feel like that there's this kind of demand for them to share something that they're not really comfortable to share. And I think that you and the things that you produce, you have this sensitivity to what a person's experience has been, and you acknowledge that and respect it, and that's so important. And a lot of organizations unwittingly end up really using people in a way that can also be harmful. And I think you've mastered that kind of strategy of really respecting, seeing, getting the word out to people who need it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we're all one big tribe. There's a lot of forms of exploitation. There's a lot of things that people have suffered through. We all have a different version of suffering in our own lives, which is also a bridge for us to empathize. Sometimes people suffer in ways that are completely different than us, and it's harder to empathize. We ultimate empathy is, I have suffered as you have suffered.
Yeah.
And there are people who go through stuff like that, and there's a special bond there. And then there's the idea of, I have suffered differently, but I've also suffered deeply. And there's a bridge to empathy that's there. And if you don't feel like that you can walk in someone else's shoes, you can at least walk with them. And all you got to do to empathize is step into the space. That's what you got to do.
Yeah. Have you ever seen the movie The Crossing Guard?
No.
It was done by Sean Penn. And it's an interesting film. And in the film, there's this conversation. This guy has just gotten out of prison. He hit and ran a little girl and killed her. And then he ended up driving until he ran out of gas, got arrested, put in prison for 6 years. And he just got released. And so his friends throw this little party for him, and they're all talking. And one of the conversations was around this point, that it's easy to empathize with, the guy, sitting there with no food to eat, or, like in this situation. But what about the corporate CEO who's dealing with all these issues, with quietly within himself, who ends up, going up to the top of a building and jumping off? It's like, he doesn't look like someone who deserves our empathy. And we so often kind of, disconnect from the reality that basically every one of us has some degree of trauma. We have some degree of damage in our lives, and it manifests differently. And you're right. It's like, that's our link. That's our link. We can empathize with pretty much anyone if we tap into that I've got issues, I've got pain, I've got a situation that's really, that nobody knows, that I've dealt with in my life. And here's this other person in front of me that gives me the lens to be able to recognize what they've gone through. And you're right. It may not be the same, but it's something that I can share, that we have something in common, and how critical that is.
Yeah.
God, especially these days.
Yeah.
Brad, I would love to
Yeah.
thank you for being a part of the stream. And of course, what's important is, like, any final thoughts that you think it's important for the audience, for the future viewers and the future listeners to, like, know, how can they be more proactive? How can they be a part of your organization?
Yeah. I think number one, we ask people to identify their intersection. And all of us have an intersection with this issue. Way we got families and friends that we all care about, that we want to be safe. And so let's start with our families. Let's start with our neighborhoods. Let's start there, the home space. Then you've got the workspace. Ask yourself, where in my work do I intersect with this issue? And who would have ever thought that, a web company could go, I'm fighting human trafficking, but our web company who builds our websites, that's how they fight human trafficking. They pro bono our website. They're called Never Settle. Go to their website and hire them. When you hire them, that means they can keep helping us for free. And so, like, get creative. A truck driver can change a kid's life now. So there's all these different ways. So think about, how do you intersect with this issue? If you intersect with youth and you work with youth, or you're a youth leader, or you're part of the Boys and Girls Club, or you're part of the PTA, you can use your voice to lobby to get these kind of materials into the spaces that you care about. So think about, where is your intersection, and then how can I make a difference in that space? We had an apartment complex who wanted to do something, and they're like, we need something just for us. And so because they were so moved to do it, we basically were like, look, we're going to build some material just for you. And they came to us and said, we want to fight the issue, and we partnered with them to help do it. So I think in some ways we're willing to hear ideas and see where there's some overlap and connect. So think about your intersection. If you work with youth, no brainer. We've got the Empower Youth program. Be a part of that. And I think the overall thing, whether you partner with us or you partner, to bring our work into any of your spaces, the biggest thing is that we all acknowledge that this issue is something that we all have to take responsibility for, because we cannot relegate it to law enforcement to fix the problem. We can't react to this problem. We have to get in front of it. And so that's really going to take all of us. And we don't need to push everybody into the deep end of the pool where you got to do something crazy and sell off your life and start a nonprofit. You can start at the shallow end of the pool and just work your way in and go as deep as you need to go. But you just need to get in the pool. You need to get in and make a difference, whether that's small or big. And here's the truth behind all of this. It actually requires a mix of radical and reasonable gestures to change the world. Not everybody's going to do something radical. Not everybody's going to do a reasonable small thing, but when you mix it all together, that's honestly what changes things. It's all of us doing something. So my encouragement to everyone is to acknowledge where it's at in your life and in your space, acknowledge where you might be feeding the problem without even knowing it. Start to identify those things, especially like in labor trafficking. We're making purchases all the time where people are suffering based on those purchases. Let's get woke on all of this. Let's get conscious about it. And then from there, a simple question of what can I do? And then start with that.
It's brilliant. That's it. So with that, please go to iempathize.org. Check out all the materials that they have. Give support so that more can be brought into our schools and brought into our all the places where people intersect with this issue. And
we're looking for leaders as well, Patrick. Any kind of leadership. We're building leadership teams all the time. So that's all obviously a big help to us as well.
Great. Share the word. That's what we're here for. We want people to see it, end it, see their part in it, see how they can get in the water, as Brad says. I like that. So please follow us here on Twitch. Those of you who have tuned in, follow us, become a subscriber. Make sure that we can get more voices like Brad's out into the spaces where they really need to be heard. There's a lot of people that really just don't understand and don't know what's happening. They really need to hear a voice like Brad's. So any support that you give to this program, you're going to get voices of Brad and other people out there where they need to be. And thank you so much for tuning in today. We're so grateful for everyone who tunes in from around the world and locally. And join us again next Tuesday. We'll be back next Tuesday, same time.
Thank you everyone for tonight. Thank you for our raids, our gifts, our bits for our stream tonight. Thank you so much for all the great questions in chat and great discussion. We will see you on next Tuesday, 7 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Central Time. Thank you again, Brad, for being a part of this. We are going to raid you guys over to KB. He was in chat earlier and a supporter of this channel. So thank you again, everyone, and hope you guys have a wonderful night.
Good night, everybody.
Have a good one.
Good night. Thanks so much.